Thanks for joining us for this second event in our Far and Away series for 2020 and 2021. Just to give you a little background on this series, FAR is the Facility for Arts Research. It's made up of faculty from the FSU College of Fine Arts, and that includes its three co-directors. That's me, Denise Bookwalter, and Judy Russian, and FAR's operations manager, Marty Fielding. Part of our mission at FAR is to engender and support collaboration across a variety of artistic disciplines. One way that we've been doing that for some years now is our Far and Away Visiting Artist program. So the way that works in normal times is that we invite an artist to join us in Tallahassee for about a week, and there's a public lecture, an event of some kind, but also most of the time that they're here, we're trying our best to hook them up with faculty, scholars, people from FSU community and beyond as a way to advance their collaborative creative practices and also maybe spark some collaborations that can live beyond their time here. So that's been really successful. This year, we're obviously doing it a bit differently, and we've kind of translated Far and Away into this series of live streamed conversations between artists. And so for each of these four events, we've selected an artist and ask them to invite someone or identify someone that they want to have a conversation with. And then we invite that person on their behalf and we have them here before us. So far, we've heard from artist Kelly Lloyd and writer Yayli Kamara. Tonight, we have artist Noel W. Anderson and gallerist Jayne Johnson. And we have two more events that are happening next semester in the spring. So I'll mention those now. On January 19th, we have Related Tactics, which is a collective of artists and cultural workers. They'll be talking about their collaborative work within communities of color and the diaspora. And then on February 9th, that may have changed. It's February 9th. We'll have with us performance artists Elliot Reed and also performance artist Ron Athey. For each of the events, we have kind of this similar format. It's a live stream through YouTube, and then you, the audience, are watching this conversation unfold live and in real time, and you have the opportunity to kind of contribute and collaborate in that conversation in a way. For each event, that's probably going to function a little bit differently. For tonight, I'll be here watching the chat on YouTube and collecting your comments and questions, and then I'll bring them to Noel and Jayne at the end of the event, and they'll go from there. I'll just say we may, I don't know, depending on how many questions we get, we may not be able to get to everything. So if you're looking at the chat and you see something that somebody mentions that's particularly interesting to you, maybe just echo that or copy and paste it just so it doesn't get missed. So that's all kind of the logistical stuff having to do with the event. I'll give you a quick introduction to our guests and then we'll get right into the conversation. So our guests tonight are Noel W. Anderson and Jayne Johnson. Noel Anderson earned an MFA from Indiana University in printmaking, I think with our own Denise Bookwalter. And also he has an MFA from Yale University in sculpture. He's the area head of printmaking at NYU's Steinhardt Department of Art and Art Professions. In 2018, Noel was awarded the New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship Grant and the prestigious Jerome Prize. His solo exhibition, Black Origin Moment, was shown at the Contemporary Art Center in Cincinnati in 2017 and the Hunter Museum of American Art in 2019. His first monograph, Black Origin Moment, was also recently published. Jayne Johnson is the owner of JDJ, a contemporary art gallery located in New York's Hudson Valley that highlights artists who embody a range of artistic practices and social-political perspectives. She has nearly 20 years of experience in a variety of roles in the New York art world as a gallery director and with institutions such as MoMA PS1 and the Drawing Center. We're excited to have both Noel and Jayne with us and to have you, the audience, with us in the chat as well. So here are Noel Anderson and Jayne Johnson. Thanks.
Oh, cool. My sense is we're live now.
I believe.
Cool. Well, I just want to say thank you, Florida State University, for inviting me to do this, and thank Jayne. Thank Jayne for for not only supporting my work as my new friend in Dila, but also agreeing to come onto this bandstand, which we'll call a presentation. This is gonna be fun.
Thanks
So
for inviting me. I'm so happy to be in conversation with you, and thanks to FSU for making this possible.
these are fucking facts. So for those who know how I do these things, I usually start off with music, because the entertainer has to be brought to stage. I had this Beyonce moment, y'all. I was over here listening to Bigger. You're part of something way bigger. And I thought to myself, yes, so we understand that we voted and we are much bigger than what they told us we were supposed to be. But, YouTube has regulations. We can't play it. So you must assume that was the introduction. Right? But no, so the reason I wanted to invite Jayne for this conversation is because we have been having these amazing discourses in my studio as well as, outside of the studio about my work. And not just about my work, but about how my work is coming to being and how it relates to where we are or the contemporary conditions in which we find ourselves. And I thought that maybe Jayne and I could have an intense conversation in public because we have really intense conversations in private, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So I think we could start with I don't know, maybe we should, where do we start? Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, I'll start at the beginning of how I got to know your work, which is the phenomenal museum exhibition, touring exhibition that you had. That was at CAC in Cincinnati, and then Hunter Museum in Tennessee, Black Origin Moment. I was just leafing through an art forum, and I came across the art forum review of the show when it was at Hunter, and I was just blown away by the sophistication of your practice. And I was like, this is incredible work, and just the way that it related to the present, the past, sociopolitically, the art historical references, your approach to materiality, like the whole thing. I was just like, this guy is the real deal, and I need to get to know him. And then we came to find out that we had some close friends in common. So that was even nicer. And yeah, and so just to fill you all in, Noel just had an exhibition at the gallery from August until early October that focused on some of his recent works on paper, which we'll get into a bit more. But maybe we should just kind of start at the beginning and talk about the tapestry works, because they're sort of like the centerpiece of your practice. But what's really interesting is the way that everything that you make is sort of encompasses so many different ways of making that it becomes hard to say what exactly it is. It's many things at once.
But that's the fun, right? Okay, so for those who have, now where is my top? There we go. For those who have heard me speak about this before, bear with us, but we have to lay a kind of groundwork for the kind of cultural and political work we're about to do tonight. So I used to have a friend, he's still a friend, but he's passed away, Jack Tilden. And, he used to be my old dealer. And Jack used to say to me, you got to go to the Met, right? And he would say, you got to go to the Met on Friday nights. You got to go to the Met on Friday nights. And I'd be like, yo, bruh, pump the brakes, chill. I go to the Met all the time. But he was adamant that Friday night was the way to go. And I would say, why? I said, because all the famous artists go. Now, granted, this was about 10 plus years ago. Because on Friday nights, it was open late, right? It was like open late. Tourists didn't go. And at that time, about 10 plus years ago, from my experience, it was a lot of artists. And I would say, okay, well, I could go and I could stare at Richard Tuttle staring at something. And, Richard Tuttle would stare at a fucking rock. And I would be like, well, wait a minute. Why do I stare at Richard Tuttle staring at a rock? Why don't I find something, right? And I found myself in the medieval wing. I remember it was me and this attendant, and I believe it was an older white woman, which was interesting. But we had this great conversation about why these tapestries that I was staring at in the medieval wing in the Great Hall, right? They had that big iron, that big gate in the Great Hall they used to. And I realized after talking to her and then doing a little reading, I was like, oh, this is the beginning of photography. This is the beginning of representation, one-to-one representation by way of lenses, if you will.
Reproducing an image.
Right? Yeah, exactly, right? And I thought to myself, well, there's got to be other ways in which to access this and make it more applicable to my life. And after reading a ton of books, or a few things really, I realized that the way the weaving that I'm interested in is really based on binary coding, right? Jacquard introduces this punch card registration, which clearly after Charles Babbage, the English gentleman in the 1800s, picks it up, introduces what we now know as the grandfather of the computer. Nerdy as hell, but Black Nerd is kind of cool, just letting y'all know. Don't let Steve Urkel steer y'all wrong. So it's just the truth. Listen, I got a whole slew of tapestries that are about Steve Urkel and Black intelligence. But either way, so once I realized that, I was like, okay, I can start making tapestries. And then something funny happened. Ooh, it's like a church ball at a barbecue. Something funny happened. I realized, no, that's not true. I was doing therapy. I was. And I tapped into an experience and a memory of my childhood. I'm the youngest of 6 from Louisville, Kentucky. I sat next to my father at the dinner table in the 80s. It's important to say the 80s because in the 80s, we had a TV in the corner of the kitchen where we ate. And the TV had rabbit ears. And I sat next to my father as the youngest, and whenever the image would wobble, did you warble, my little wren? W.C. Fields. Whenever the image would warble or wobble, he would say to me, boy, go fix that. Now, it's important to understand that my father was born in 1926. And as such, he went to MIT in the 50s, which to me means he was academically schooled. So when he broke linguistic code, you knew he was serious. Right? When he was grammatically incorrect, oh, this motherfucker ain't tripping. Oh, shit. Daddy ain't playing. So when he said, boy, go fix this, not Noel, could you please go? He was, boy, you go fix it. And I realized with playing with those rabbit ears in the 80s, I had the power to stabilize image. Fast forwarding to today, once I pieced all that together, by which I mean Jacquard, Babbage, computers, screen image, all that collapsed into the tapestry for me. Right? And I was even able to take that kind of warbling little wren, that warping image, and import it into the tapestries, right? So when you see imagery like dilating, Rob, can we go to dilating? I think we have like images to show. Perfect. Like images like this, which are at Tyler Contemporary right now until the end of next week. And then it gets sent to LA for a show in LA. Images like this to me didn't seem real because they came from a screen. To me, that in itself wasn't real because I had the ability to manipulate the image, right? So all of that is embedded in these works, right? But it's deeper than that, right? It's deeper than that because what it required me to understand, and then let's break it out to have a fucking conversation about where we are. What it required me to understand, oh, I'm gonna get emotional. I'm sorry, Jayne, I'm gonna get emotional.
Go, it's a safe space here for you, Noel.
Thank you. What it required of me to understand in a Western context is that I had to check my masculinity. I had to check my understanding of myself as a Black male and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe the vision, the expression that I needed to express the things that I'm after required a kind of touch that is gendered or stereotypically gendered, right? A kind of brutalist way of approaching imagery, which is hyper masculine, hyper patriarchal, was not going to get me to the sensitivity that I needed. And tapestry was the way, because it's fabric, it's weaving. In Western culture, it's stereotypically women's work. Well, what does it mean when a Black man takes on that? Let's go there.
It's also close to the skin. It's,
Yes.
it is part of our, it's part of our everyday because it's next to our bodies. And I think that the intimacy of that as a material is really, it's just a really interesting medium to be working with. I actually want to go back to something that you said a couple of times, which is about the image being real, or the reality of the image. And what's interesting to think about is oh, I have a fly around me. I'm having like a little Mike Pence moment. My gallery's up in the country. We've got bugs every once in a while. It's okay. So this feeling of images and this relationship between images and reality is really interesting, because images, even though they feel real, they are not real. And I think this is something that's, they are very subjective. It's easy to kind of take something as truth, but who's taking that picture? What's left out of the image? These are all really interesting things to think about, the veracity of what we're seeing.
Yes. Okay. So, okay. No. This is good. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm getting the energy. Well, goddamn, it's coming through me. I'm sorry, Jayne, if I cut you off. I am totally sorry. May I say something?
Yeah.
You must be sensitive. You must be conscious of people's feelings. I am sorry if I cut you off. But so we have a work. The dialighting, boom, is at Tyler Contemporary right now. Been there for about a couple of months. Yeah. Okay. So they email me and they say, yo, call us now. We have something important to talk to you about. I'm like, yo, did someone desecrate the throne? Did someone mess up the archive? Did someone cut the tapestry? They said, nah. Saturday, they said Saturday, it's like two months ago. They said Saturday, there's a gentleman who works here who's a janitor. Or if you're Dave Chappelle, a master of custodial arts, or a janitor if you want to be a dick about it. Half-baked, learn your receptions. They said he came here and he stood in front of this tapestry, 9 feet by 13 feet. They said one of the graduate assistants came up to him and said, well, what do you think of it? And he said, while he had broom in hand, he said, well, that shit's not real. And his older black man, maybe 50, 60, she said, what do you mean? He said, that's not how that happened. And she said, what do you mean? He said, I was there. I was 10. I was standing across the street when the man was taking the photograph. I saw the whole fucking thing. Yeah. I said, oh shit, I got to get the man on the phone. So we were talking last week. I said, what do you mean the image isn't real? He said that the image doesn't tell you what it felt like to be there. When Rizzo, the commissioner of police commissioner, soon to be, I believe, mayor, when Rizzo came in and had his stormtroopers shoot bullets at the building that the Black Panthers were in, the Black Panthers headquarters, 1970. This is the 50th anniversary, by the way, this year in Philly, which is important. I called him and talked to him about that. He said, you don't understand what that was like. I said, tell me about it, because you're a living archive. He said, the photograph lies to you. The photograph doesn't tell you what it sounded like for the bullet to be pinging off of that building. The photograph didn't tell you what it felt like for Rizzo to storm into that neighborhood looking for something that didn't exist, by which he meant guns that the Black Panther Party did not have. He said it was an early morning raid. It was a dawn raid. They fired on that building for hours until they realized the Black Panthers weren't going to shoot back, right? So there's a way in which we understand photographs lie to us, but if we're lucky, we have archives that are still living, right? I think that's important. My sense right now is that there are a lot of people who don't realize that there are living archives that we're just not utilizing. And if we don't tap them long enough or soon enough, they're going to be gone, you know?
The other thing that we need to do, and I think some of us do, but certainly not enough, is really ask ourselves the question of who's taking the photograph. Motivation, like this image of the Black Panthers being arrested in Philadelphia, taken 50 years ago, there was a very clear motivation behind it. And it was to show that the Black Panthers are criminals. And for that image to circulate in newspapers all around the country, and Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why somebody wanted that image, and it wasn't necessarily because the Black Panthers, in this case, I mean, they didn't do anything wrong. I read, I think I sent you, Noel, but I read an account from one of the men that was in that image, that was photographed in that picture too, and they just dragged them out of bed. I mean, to take the image, basically.
Yes, but well, let's go.
The power of that image in circulation is something that, I mean, it's something that we know today because we're in such an image heavy culture. Images speak so much, but they knew that 50 years ago too. And I'm sure they knew it 100 years ago and 150 years ago. I mean, it's always about this sort of someone's choice to depict a certain person or groups of people, or in this case, these Black men as criminals, and have that image get recirculated over and over. There's real, there's a power. I mean,
yes.
They're trying to make that image the truth, even though it's not. And I think.
But let's go there, because I like that. Like, so then the question for me in terms of the work, well, fuck the work. Let's talk about Trump. But we will. The terms that matter to me are how is it, I'm probably asking this question wrong. Ooh. How is it that an image like that is taken and we don't assume, or maybe we assume that that's the only one, right? I guess what the question I'm really asking is, why don't we understand that there is a systematic structure that produced that image? And I know that a lot of people understand it, but it seems to me that it's lost in translation, the fact that this image existed, and the fact that if we could go to the Goya image afterwards, right? The fact that this image exists, which is based off a real event, and the fact that if we could go back to the daylighting, Rob, and the fact that this image existed, which is a reality. It seems to me to be, if we can go back to the Goya, that the structures that make these experiences possible are not just limited to our contemporary conditions, right? And there was something that Jayne and I were talking about in her space a few weeks ago that was kind of like, well, why do you keep reusing the same image? Well, because the same image keeps being presented, or images similar to this keep being represented in the world, right? That are not just Black or African-American based or anti-Black violence based, but they're also Spanish based. They're also Chinese based, right? There's a reason why,
Power.
Say that again.
Power.
But it can't be deeper than that. It has to be deeper. It's not just power, it's bigger than power. Who has power? Let's go there. Who has the power? Who has the power? Is it the person who has the camera?
Good question. That's really complicated and sort of, I don't know. I mean, this feels like a good segue to talk a little bit about the election, because it felt like the people had the power for a minute.
No, it did. It felt like, okay, let's relive that. Then we'll circle back to the images, because I think there's something to be talked about, the power of the artist, because you some bitches ain't doing enough on the screen, by which I mean the other artists in this world. Just ask Marcus. So Saturday happened, right? Saturday happened. Joe Biden flexed up, boom, boom, right? And I remember I was in Harlem. My partner and I were in Harlem chilling. All of a sudden I hear horns banging, right? 10th floor apartment. I'm hearing horns on 5th Avenue and 132nd blasting. My partner looks at me, she's like, is it over? I said, what? I checked the news. I'm like, holy shit, it's over. I cried like a bitch. It was awesome. It was awesome. I had a deluge of emotion that we all seem to have had, not just because of COVID, but 4 years of the nastiness of this person, right? And then all of a sudden I woke up today and I looked online. I was like, oh, they're going to keep fighting this? And I realized it's not over, right? It's not over. And I realized that my studio practice is more valued now than ever, right? It's like the images that I make the work that I make has so much more value, right? Now, because this man is defiant that he gonna put his foot in the sand and keep it cute and not keep it moving, right? So then that's the question I have. What is the responsibility of the art world? What do you think, Jayne? What is the responsibility of the art world now? Is it do we keep it cute, keep it moving, and keep making money for those who are making money, or do we really dig in, like decolonize this place or space, and really try to figure out where we are? What do you think? That's a question.
It's a really good question, and I think that the answer is that the art world's going to keep it cute and keep it moving, because
fuck, you kill me. Don't.
I'm not. Let me just premise my answer by saying,
okay,
this isn't what I think we should be doing. This is what I think is going to happen.
Okay.
I think that, okay, when Trump got elected in 2016, it was like, I mean, I think you were in New York then. I was in New York then. It felt like 9/11, the mood the next day. It was, and then for the art world, the mood was pretty terrible for, you know, a month, 2 months. But the problem with the art world is that it's run by people who have excess wealth and who are, you know, maybe Trump's a racist, but hey, maybe my bottom line's going to be better because of it. Maybe my stock portfolio is going to be doing better.
Yeah.
So it was a very short sort of like depression in terms of people kind of reacting that way. The art world is not progressive. I mean, it's just not. I wish that it was, but I think that really there needs to be like a redistribution of wealth, and the people that run, like, in order to sort of solve a lot of problems in society. And I think that the people that are in charge, they are not interested in that. So they're going to keep it cute and keep it moving is the answer. But I think that, like, what we can do, I mean, if we're involved in this world, and so in some ways we're sort of complicit with aspects of it. And this is something that as a gallerist, I think about and I struggle with a lot, because I have personal ideals that are not in line with like that ethos. So I try to do everything that I can in every way that I can, as a gallerist, as a business person, as somebody that cares about social justice and about equality, to just do things that put energy in the right places, and put money in the right places. I mean, I've done a couple of projects with artists that have gone to kind of directly support causes that I care about, like supporting women that are domestic abuse survivors, or abortion rights in Alabama, which has, one of the country's worst policies. But I think that, like, if people within the art world can really put their money where their mouth is when they can, that can help. But I think that overall, I mean, the art world has I think an obligation to try to like have these conversations. And but I also think that in the art world there's a lot of posturing, and there's a lot of kind of pretending to sort of be socially engaged, but not really to do any meaningful work towards it.
Motherfucking facts. So understanding that, once I understood that, for me, that seemed to be real, right? Then I allowed myself to let go, right? And letting go means, if we could get to, let's start with Hands Up, the 4 Tapestries. Perfect. Letting go meant sticking to my reality, my, as as my younger nieces and nephews say, they say, but Uncle, no, is that the real truth? I'm like, what are you talking about? They like, is that the true truth? I'm like, I didn't know truth could have a truth to it. I didn't know you could be exponential about truth. But you know what? God damn it, yeah, Lincoln, that's the true truth. And he would be like, okay. And then he'd go back to playing video games. And in his way, it was just so obvious, right? Right. And I, as an artist, and it's weird, out of the mouths of babes, I, as an artist, so many years ago, needed my young nephew to tell me that. I needed him to validate my experience and my reality, even though he had never experienced, because he was like 4, which then put me on the fast track to these kinds of works, where I was like, well, you know what, if my reality is I'm interested in like framing or using a modernist crop on images that I choose to appropriate and redefining those images for a contemporary position or contemporary condition, then let's do it, right? It's weird. I needed a 4-year-old to give me license, right? So when we look at a work like Hands Up, now in the collection of Hunter Museum of American Art in Chattanooga, shout out to Nandini and the Hanging Crew. When I look at an image like this, I'm like, yeah, this is my reality, right? Like I grew up in a world where my father was a civil engineer who went to MIT in the 50s. My mother was a social worker and then became a teacher and a principal after she quit being a social worker because they were hella racist and sexist and doing some things to her that were not okay. All of these, and to think about my aunts and uncles were all born in the 19 teens. Like my eldest aunt was born in like 1912. You know what I mean? Like that allowed me to understand that my personal history is so vast. Like my father, whose grandfather was born into slavery, my father could tell me narratives about his experience with his grandfather who grew up in slavery, and then he could tell me those experiences. For me, my spectrum of history is so vast that these images to me seem so contemporary as much as Lady Gaga feels contemporary, right? For me, history is not located in a kind of linear mode, but it kind of like loops and bounces. It's quantum, it's entangled, it's circular, it's liquid, you know? And the images that I work with try to do that. You know, does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think like Dailaitung is such a great example of that, because here's this image that was...
Can we go to that one, Rob? Thank you.
I mean, here is this image taken 50 years ago, but like change the glasses on the cop and like it could have been taken yesterday. It could have been taken during Reconstruction. It could have been taken during slavery. I mean, it's an image that is so unfortunately evergreen. It's really part of like the DNA of America. And I think that that's also why it's so powerful. It's not just about, it is about a particular moment in time, but it's a conversation that's been relevant since essentially the beginning of the country, and it is now. So, and I think that that's another reason why the images that you choose are so powerful, because they feel connected to the past, they feel connected to the present. You know what would be interesting? Sorry to jump around with the images, but going back to the 4-part Hands Up, you're using also some images that reference art history, from the Dogon sculpture to, and the top right, this image that Glenn Ligon appropriated. And maybe you want to just talk about that, because I think that you're showing it with also the Goya image, but you're thinking very much about art history as well as the sort of the racial history of the country too. And I think that's a really fascinating aspect of just how you're thinking about using images.
That's good. I like that, because the Dogon sculpture, which is the image is top. So yeah, we had it in paper. Let's keep it there. Let's keep it there. So even in hands up, the quadrants that we saw before is the top right, but let's keep it here. So in 2015, during Michael Brown, I was still religiously going to the Met, and I remember I would always start in the African wing, right? And they always had the hand. They would have this object, the Dogon hands up sculpture. The first thing you saw. Now I remember when Michael Brown happened. That some bitch, by which I mean the Dogon sculpture, disappeared.
Really?
It disappeared for. I remember it disappeared for a while.
Oh wow!
I'm sure it was conservation.
Huh?
And then then it came back. I remember sitting there or standing there because there was seats in that space. I remember standing there and watching the tourists photograph his butt because it's a full body figure. Pose against the black figure's bottom, stare at his genitalia. And I thought to myself, even in this moment, they have still objectified the black form, right? And as soon as I saw that, I said, well, shit, I got to do something with it. And then in my mind, I made that connection. I was like, well, hands up, don't shoot, black. I mean, if you look at the Dogon sculpture in terms of this blue piece of paper that we made at Dieudonné, one arm is still there, one arm is gone. In my mind, imagine, I was like, well, this arm was shot off, right? I was like, even in our history in the 18th, 19th century, the ancestors were telling us it's going to happen again, right? I think there's a kind of foreshadowing. There's a kind of prophecy that if we look at our past, it's there. I don't give a shit what Nietzsche says. You know, he's all talking about this kind of percentage of dealing with history. Fuck that. I deal with everything, right? Because if we don't acknowledge these things have occurred, we can't see those patterns in our contemporary space, right? And I think that's really what I'm interested in doing in a lot of the work is like finding patterns of either resistance or oppression and trying to draw from those patterns in terms of praxis, exploring how I can perform them in the world, right? And I think that's how images work for me, in the sense that they belong to an archive, but I have access to that archive. We all have access to it. And the archive isn't this like physical thing that you go to like a library. It's everywhere. And if you really want to understand what that means, just read Derrida's Archive Fever. He tells you everything. I mean, it's a little dense and weird, but it'll get you there, right? And images work that way for me, that they're not historically located in a time and it's shut off. They're always present and they're always happening, right? And if we could understand that, we could do whatever we want with them. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me.
You have such a careful and sensitive way of choosing images that every time you use an image, I always like want to do a deep dive on like all of the different meanings behind it. Like this Dogon sculpture is, I went to read the Met's catalog entry for this piece, and it's of an elder. And I think that's also really interesting that it's like the wise tribal elder. It's, you know, it's like the person with the knowledge is one that you're depicting or sort of calling into question. And then there's also the relationship between the fact that it's in the Met's collection, the fact that it's been, you know, how did it get there? I'm sure that they didn't like purchase it and like, you know, I'm sure that they didn't just like compensate the ancestors of the Dogon tribe for it, and all of, you know, all of these different, each choice that you're making when you're using an image, there are so many different questions that are raised. And I think that that's another really fascinating thing about your practice is, you know, it seems so simple to just choose an image and then work with it. But it's not. I mean, you're really thinking about things from so many different sides.
Let's go there. Because that's such a good point. Because if we think, okay, let's go here. Okay. So I do a show at Contemporary Arts Center, Cincinnati in 2017. And I receive emails periodically, saying, I've come back to the show 4 or 5 times. Every time I see something different. I'm like, that's the fucking point, right? That's why I love Derrida. That's why I love Heidegger. That's why I love Langston Hughes and Ellison, Ralph Ellison, because you can always go back to those narratives, those pages, and find answers. I can always go back to an Audre Lorde. I can always go back to an Audre Lorde and find something new. Audre Lorde taught me how to love. Y'all not even hearing me out there. Let's go beyond us, Jayne. Let's talk to the group. Audience. Audre Lorde taught me how to love. She taught me that erotics is not the kind of patriarchal sexualism, but it's deeper. It's a love that goes beyond everything, goes beyond sense. She taught me how to love. And I only got that because I went back to her 4 or 5 times plus to read specific poems, to read specific essays, right? I would read something like, what the hell is she even talking about, right? I went back to the archive, if you will, to the Dogon, a bunch of times until I was like, oh, this makes sense, right? I say that because I feel like a lot of, I'm not gonna say a lot, but I feel like some artists are interested in the flash in the pan, the quick thing. Like, I got this idea, I'm gonna do it. But I want people to understand that I am rooted into a rigor that's beyond just, I go to the studio, I make a thing, it sells, I move on. I stick with stuff for a long time. I linger with things because they haunt me. And as a performative, I would say like an Austin kind of performativity, I don't let the thing haunt me. I want to haunt the thing, right? I want the thing to be repossessed with life and come back to me and be like, you wouldn't let me lie. I'm gonna say, yeah, that's right, homie. Your work's not done. I've conjured you from the other side. Now get your ass back to work because we not done with you yet, right? And I really believe that the images, because I'm a spiritual motherfucker, I really believe that the images and the objects and the ideas that I'm working with are conjuring ideas and spirits like the Dogon that to be honest, we're not done with them yet, you know? But that's a double-edged sword in the sense that some people are just like, well, it's the same image. I'm like, but it's not. You don't look at a Robert Ryman, and some people look at a Robert Ryman painting and it's like, well, he has like 14 paintings in a row and it's the same white painting over and over again on burlap or on plastic. And people are like, it's the same painting. I'm like, but it's not the same painting. Because painting 2 is not the same as painting 3. Right? And my sense is that kind of seriality works in the work. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And also, and maybe this is a good moment to talk about the materiality of your work, because you will use images in so many different mediums, and even within the same medium with so many different treatments, that you're actually able to completely transform them multiple times. So the Daylighton tapestry that we have been showing images of is of a monumental piece that's currently on view at Temple University. There was also an iteration of this image that you made recently for the exhibition that we did of the paperworks from Dieudonné. And maybe you can just talk to people for a bit about that process, because it's a really fascinating one.
That's great. Rob, I don't even remember. Do we have that in the queue? Is there an image later on? Can we just flip through the images real quick after this? I'm not even sure. I'm sure people are like, Rob, who's Rob? But that's okay. Well, can we go to
this? This is actually an interesting one to look at, because this is a crop of that image.
Right. You're totally right. Let's go there. Okay. So, right. Let's deal with this one, because this is actually from the Daylighton, right? So the image was chosen first, and with my weavers, we worked it into the weaving, right? But I think you're right, Jayne, because materiality is key. Is absolute. If the image is woven, it's not the same as if the image is made as a sheet of paper, right? So this process we kind of worked with at Dieudonné Paper Making in the Navy Yard in Brooklyn, legendary space. Apply for the residency. It's one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life. You know, next to learning how to make, a good waffle. I like a good waffle. Anyways, so we got to this space and they were like, what do you want to do? I was like, I have all these other images that I'm interested in. And I realized that The dialighting image is one mode of representing blackness that is a blackness that is oppressed. But how can you subvert that logic, right? So then I take the image of dialighting, find a subject that has his hands back or cuffed, present it or represent it as a sheet of paper, which is like this, it's like silkscreen paper, it's a whole rigmarole, and then flip it upside down, right? The apex of which is the top of the hands, right? It becomes like a triangle. It's a form of resistance, right? It, to me, speaks about the ways in which images aren't static, right? We can appropriate anything and we can make them do what we want them to do. You know, you quote Ray Charles. I'm gonna make it do what it do, right? As much as I think Warhol was not always the nicest person. He did teach me that, right? The iteration of the image is important. If I represent it, can we go back to dialectic? If I represent the image this way, there is a kind of anti-Black economizing of Black male subjectivity. If I go to the sheet of paper that we just went to, cuffed, can we go to the, Rob, can we go to that? There we go. That is a total subversion of that large tapestry. And if we look at the inches, like the size, it's much smaller, right? Which is interesting if I stare at some of the work behind you. Things don't have to be big to be important. Right. Things don't have to be grandiose to have gravitas. Small works can do big legwork. Dig?
Small works are often the works that will really like get you, you know, that'll like get you in the gut. Like, right? They're the ones that'll, I mean, the intimacy of scale, I think, is really, when you see something small and it's moving, it, you know, emotionally, it's really, it can be really powerful. To me, it can often be more powerful than when you see something monumental.
Yeah, because it's funny because when I have my students, because, you know, I teach at NYU, when I have students, they want to do these big fucking projects. I'm like, yo, 90% of this big thing ain't even popping. It's not even working. But there's like 5%, possibly 10% in this little corner that is firing on all cylinders. I'm gonna need you to do that one thing. That's it. The rest of it's not popping. And I think on a metaphorical level, we could talk about that in terms of where we are in our political condition. We seem to believe that small gestures of voting don't always work. But God damn it, I think they do work, right? A small gesture or a small painting can be so much more powerful than a big, chunky, gestural hunk of mess. A perfect example of that would be, oh, may I tell you a story?
Please, everybody wants to hear it.
Oh, I don't know about that. My mother would be like, you told it too many times. Shut the fuck up, boy. My mother loves me sometimes. So there's the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. I went years ago. And everybody was mesmerized by potato eaters, flowers, trees, portraits. I'm the kind of person, I'm very personal. I hold things to myself. I don't let a lot of people in, which is obvious in some regards. And in those instances, I just want to go to a place that nobody's located. So I went to the top floor. Nobody was on the top floor with me, the attendant, again. And there was a painting. It had to have been about 10 by 12, specifically called Crab on Back. Crab on Back. And it was what it was. It was a fucking crab on its back. It was sitting next to a Picasso that was, I don't know, 70 inches by 60 inches. But this painting that Van Gogh did was so powerful. The greens and the reds, motherfucking fire. You hear me? Fire. And I thought to myself, Picasso, get out of here. You don't have anything on this little ass painting. This painting had more gravitas and more weight and more power, right? Collectively than that one Picasso or 40 Picasso paintings had, right? So there's a conversation that can be had about the scale of imagery, the scale of work that we do, not just in the studio, but in life, in political space, in cultural space, that has gravitas. Don't think your voice doesn't matter, because motherfucker, it does. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Ooh, I'm starting to catch a rhythm. Ooh, I'm starting to catch a rhythm. So can we talk about something? Because something's been on my mind.
Yes.
Something's been on my mind. I'm curious, and maybe you could help me work through this, because I'm stuck. You're gonna be my therapist right now. Y'all gonna watch Noel W. Anderson go through therapy. It's gonna be a motherfucking trip for the next couple of minutes. What's the role of the artist? Now, what do you think, Jayne? Because I have a sneaky suspicion what I think my role as the artist is, or all roles of the artist. What do you think the role of the artist is now?
The role of the artist in greater society at large?
I don't know. Let's keep it. You tell me. Let's go. I know. I love these broad questions. My students hate it.
I mean, I think that, I don't know. It's such a hard question to answer. I mean, for me, I feel most passionate in terms of my work and working with artists. I feel most passionate and interested in working with artists who are telling us something about the world that we're living in, who are showing us a side of something that is that maybe is right in front of us, but we can't quite see. And then a work that is made by that artist helps us kind of discover something about our larger existence. Helps us show us something that's invisible, but is also right in front of us.
I like that.
I think that to me, that is what makes work really exciting to think about and spend time with. And yeah, just like work that's a reflection of our moment. But that's not to say that,
yes,
you know, sometimes like something that can transport us is also really interesting. And in fact, that's equally as needed right now, because like we all need to kind of like step outside of this horror show from time to time and just like take a breath, and something that can transport us, like a good book or a song or, you know, something else can really help us right now.
Oh, you think? Oh, that's interesting. So bugger. You think the role of the artist is to be like Star Trek?
Is to be like what?
Star Trek. We got to check it for it.
I want to be taken somewhere new, shown something new.
Thank
and I think
that's beautiful. You know, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm just in a whole nother spiritual space with you. This is beautiful.
I think some artists can do that with what is right in front of us. Like you're using existing images. You're using things that exist in our reality, yet you're able to show us something new about the world that we live in through the choices that you're making in your work, through the way that you're sort of like cropping and distilling our reality to show us something new. You know, the work on the wall behind me is by an artist, Lucia Love, who's doing something totally different, but is also like commenting on our reality in a different way. I mean, it's hard to just say what the role of the artist is. I think I feel like my answer is like a cop out, but I don't mean it to be. It's
no, Jayne, it's not a cop out, because what it establishes is the function of the artist is to give us a way of seeing.
Yeah.
I think I said that at the Tyler talk, but I say it a lot because I really ascribe to it. Like, if you all don't know, because I can't play it here because of YouTube restrictions. But if you ever want to know how I understand the function of the artist, which I think Jayne actually is eloquently exploring right now, just look at Nina Simone does that interview where they ask her, you just look it up on YouTube, Nina Simone, what is free? And she says, freedom is a feeling like love. I can't tell you what love is like. I can just tell you, I can give you stories, I can give you anecdotes, but I can't like describe it specifically. And she said, freedom is like that. But she said, freedom, she said, you want to, I'm going to go into her voice as you can't see her, but she's on my wall. She would say something, she said something like, I'll tell you what freedom is to me. She says, no fear, no fear. Children have no fear. Children have no fear.
Children also help us see things in a new way.
And she says the same thing. She says, you know what it is? It's like a new way of seeing. It's a whole new way of seeing. And that's what I want. I'm trying to create a work or a series of works that are a whole new way of seeing. And that's what Tapestry gives me. I'm interested in materials that are fully marginalized, even by the art world, right? Because the art world will accept damn near anything. You want to put up you can't do that because that's not accepted, right? That's craft. Well, what happens when craft meets political statement? What happens when craft meets cultural condition? What happens when craft meets
appropriation?
Appropriation, right?
Not a combination that probably many people would imagine to put together.
Right, and that to me seems to be, for me, where real art begins, is when people take on conditions or materials that usually people don't want to deal with, and you transform it into something more than it initially was. That's the transformation. That's the Star Trek we're talking about, right? But I'm not quite sure how many artists do that. That's another thing. I'm interested in dealing with artists who are like trying to find answers for questions that don't even exist yet. I think I remember one of my friends, Leslie Smith III, who teaches at Wisconsin, did a show with Jack Whitten years ago in Houston, at the museum in Houston. And he was like, I was in awe. Jack is a genius. He said Jack was on stage and he made a statement that, the world in which to understand these paintings doesn't exist yet. I had a problem with that because he was wrong. In order to make that statement, the world has to exist. In order to understand up is up, you have to understand its opposite existed. Well, that's besides the point. I thought to myself, well, that's brilliant, because I want to make work for a world that people don't realize exists yet. I want to make work for a world in which a black man working with textiles in a certain way is totally new. And the newness of that, I'm sorry, Jayne, let me just finish, I'm sorry. The newness of that will produce in the viewer an experience or an expression or a feeling that they had never felt before, and they don't know what to do with. And hopefully they'll come back a number of times to figure out what to do with it. What were you gonna say, Jayne? Sorry.
Well, one aspect about your work that's really interesting is that it often elicits a new feeling for people, but also materially, people don't quite understand what they're looking at. And it's multiple things at once. And I think that's maybe something that's interesting to talk about, how it's, for example, going back to the paperworks, it's based on found imagery. So it's like, there's a foot in photography. It's, in the case of these works, it's a print that's not actually just on top of the paper. It's made using paper pulp as the ink. So it's a handmade object where the image is embedded into the object itself. And that's also happening with the tapestry works, because you're weaving the image into the fabric itself. It's not on top of it. It's sort of like, it's not a painting. It's not quite a print. It's not quite photography. It's all of those things. I think that kind of like hybridity of the work is really interesting. In terms of the materials. And I think it's also interesting to think about in terms of what you're depicting, right? Like Blackness is embedded in, like, so much of your work is about especially like Black Origin Moment, the exhibition, the museum exhibition, about how to define Blackness. And the works also like can't quite, that's such a hard thing to define, and the works themselves are sort of not easily definable with the way you're making it.
Ugh, you fucker. That's good. Okay, I say it's very Dutch. You fucker. That's good. I never thought about that. I never thought. That's weird. I thought about the material relationships or how the material conditions will inform how we understand Blackness. But I never really, I guess in terms of verbalize how that really works, right? I mean, maybe I have. Let's think about that, because if we think about it in terms of the tapestries, all of those works, for those who don't know, when people see them online, I think this might be one of the deficiencies of seeing work on screen. When you see the weavings online, a lot of people say to me, "Oh, those are just printed on fabric." I'm like, nah. Printing on fabric's too easy. I can put that shit in an Epson and press print. These are all physically woven, right? So unless you come to the territory, by which I mean the gallery, or I do a close-up shot of the work, you can't even see how the material functions, right? And it seems to be easy for people to marginalize, but the material is absolute. The fact that they're woven out of cotton, and that I and my assistants now go in and physically pick a lot of threads by hand, means that I too am picking cotton in the studio, right? I too am trying to symbolically locate my ancestors, right? To the extent, and this is the weirdness that is me, which I appreciate. I go to a psychic. I have a psychic on motherfucking retainer. That's something I've never told me. You all don't hear it in the crowd, but Rob just laughed. I'm serious. I have fuck a therapist. I'm serious. Y'all laughing. The Black kids say the truth. Tell the truth to the young Black youth. I have a psychic on retainer, and I go to him, and he will say, "This is what's happening. These are the things that are occurring." And I have the recordings, right? Because he records them for me. And a lot of things he says are on point. He said to me, he was like, and y'all gonna be like, he done lost his mind. It is not Miss Cleo. He was like, you have a figure around you. He looks like this, and this. He helps you, but you don't have just him. There are a series of other figures. And I was like, oh, those remind me of so-and-so. And then I realized the people he is describing, probably my family. Right? I actually do think the person he describes is my father's grandfather, born into slavery, right? So even beyond the material level of the studio, spiritually, a spiritual material level, I am surrounded, or I draw from that, right? And I'm trying to inject that into the work. And maybe that's why I'm so drawn to vintage images, because I just feel like they speak more to where we are and where we could be going to, than to the images that we see now. Because I just feel like the images we see now are not as true in some weird way. That's weird. I don't know how to make sense out of that.
Do you think it might have to do somehow with the way the images, like the material of the images back then, like they were film cameras, they weren't digital, they had different quality to them. Like maybe it has to do with something about like the essence of the way those images are captured.
Oh,
like
shit, maybe, oh, this is like going to therapy. Maybe, oh, fucker. Maybe that's it. Oh, fuck. Maybe that's it. Maybe because we grew up in a generation where those kind of images were so tactile, right? Remember when the Polaroid would come out of the camera? Yeah, you all see it now, these little Polaroids, you don't understand. In the 80s, we had that big ass bulky camera, and my grandfather next to his Cadillac would push that button, and this machine would spit out, right? Would tongue out this image, the Polaroid, and you would get it. And remember, you would wave it?
Yeah.
There was something so sculptural about that experience. And even when I see like when I see early daguerreotypes, there's something so sculptural about the way those images are made that the digital apparatus totally strips.
That's what I was just going to say. There's like a dimensionality to the image that is part of, I think, the medium of like film photography that gets a bit flattened out in digital.
Which is funny because universities have gone away from film photography, right? They've gone away from chemicals and processes. But there's something. I'm sorry for those of you all in the audience who don't dig and don't understand. There's something so romantic about dealing with chemicals in photography. There's something so romantic about the physicality and the intimacy of being in a dark room and watching the fluid go over the film and agitating the bath to make it do what you want it to do. The screen removes that. As the screen removes, you know, intimate relationships, feelings in that way. And maybe, you know, to circle back on the materiality of the images, maybe that is what I'm after, right? When I'm picking those images, and now we're doing works where we're picking the tapestries and shoving photographic imagery behind the warp and the weft within the image, right? Now that we're picking them on a certain way, I want the audience to feel it, right? Because when you come to the studio, Jayne, because I don't let a lot of people in, I let you in. You come to the studio, you're like, God damn, the physicality of these things, I just want to touch it. But I'm like, nah, you can't touch it. It's haptic. I just want to seduce people into touching. I want to do like a David Hammond's tempting. I just want to tempt you to touch what you can't touch. You dig?
And that the sort of issue or the aspect of like seduction is an interesting thing to talk about with your work, because the work is really seductive, but the images are often, you know, they're images that you should not feel seduced by, or that you know, like,
ooh, yeah.
A lot of the images are about violence toward Black bodies, but the materiality and the way that you're sort of working with the images and the materials, the work is really seductive, and it's a very interesting dichotomy between those two forces that are kind of at play.
Let's go there, right? Because any image that I put in, I've been there. I've been arrested. I've been detained because I fit the description. I've been in jail. I've been in jail. That was fun. Not really. And I to circle back to what we said about the gentleman at Tyler, I too understood those images as not real, right? But I also understood that the philosophers, the people I call philosophers, who have given me a structure to understand the world, are all comedians, really. Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Lenny Bruce, not in that order. And those people allowed me to understand Dave Chappelle is brilliant. He ain't Richard Pryor. Well, I've had that argument with people, and every time I have that argument, they're like, oh, you right. I'm like, yeah, he ain't Richard Pryor. Dave Chappelle a genius, he ain't Richard Pryor. Those people, and Chappelle too, allowed me to understand that if I wanted to get my message across, I had to seduce people. I had to give you something, a material, something, so that you wouldn't be pushed away too fast. And textile does that. Textile is universal. Everybody wears fabric. Right? Everybody psychologically and haptically understand, or can try to understand, just by looking at a piece of fabric, what they believe it feels like, right? Everybody is tempted by the desire to touch, but then that desire to touch is undercut by the logic, as you were brilliantly saying, the image is so charged, right? And then it gets to that question, well, if I desire to touch the object, which if I remove the image is just textile, once I reintroduce the image, which is the subjugation of Black bodies, Black male bodies, and now turning into Black female bodies, once I reintroduce that, well, then who is culpable for the desiring? I myself am implicated in it. You know, my old mentor, Jessica Stockholder, said, well, what's at stake, Noel? If you're not at stake in the image, what are we talking about? Right? And that goes to every artist or everybody in the world, right? If you're making work where you're not implicated, what keeps you coming to the studio? Right? Like, there was something you said earlier about this kind of like, I don't know. I'm losing it. I haven't lost it, but it's there. I'm paraphrasing, and please like jump in because I might be totally wrong. It was something like it doesn't mean if your work is not political or fitting the imagery of our political condition, it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. But nope, I can't go there yet. It's not reworked in my mind. I'm sorry, I have to go somewhere else. It's not there yet, Jayne. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, maybe I can help jog your memory, but for me, I think that when you have a reflection of the personal is political. So often the work that, especially like with my gallery program, for example, most of the artists that I work with are putting something of themselves, of their own realities within the work. And
yeah, that's it.
That helps people see things in a new way, right? Because
that's it.
Because that's where I get transported by the way that you're seeing the world in your work, or the way that the artist who's showing behind me is seeing the world through her work. And to me, that's one of the most exciting, energizing aspects of what art can do for us.
Okay. You got me. Yes, you got me. Okay, you have me. Okay, so then the question, no, that's not the question. The point for me is I like to make work that once I leave and I come back into the studio, I want to be confused. I want to be surprised, right? I don't want the work to be predictable. I want to come back into the studio 2 days, 3 days later, pop my spotlight on and be like, who the fuck made that? Oh, it was me. Okay, what can I do with that? I want to make decisions in the studio that I don't even know what to do with, and then I have to figure out how to grapple with it. I'm not interested in predictable work. You know, that's what it was, right? And I tell my students this all the time. If you can make work or one piece that every now and then you have your 4 pieces on the wall, you know what they're doing. That's cute. We keeping that moving. But you got that one piece in the studio and you come back and every time you come in, you're like, what the fuck? Deal with that. I want to make work like that because people who make work that they already know and they just produce in products, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in getting lost, like Thelonious Monk or Ornette Coleman or Jason Moran in the Bandwagon. I want to get lost, right? Like every year, and we can't do it this year because of COVID, but Jason Moran, the genius that he is in his Bandwagon, play a performance at, they book the week at the Village Vanguard in the Village, right? I buy up the slew of tickets. I buy up every fucking night, every night they have 2 shows. I do 2 shows a night. I'm religious because I sitting there with my drink and every now and then I get a little joint, you know what I'm saying? Get a little loose. Get loose, you goose, don't be no fucking ninny. And he takes me somewhere and he gets me lost and I'm in there trying to find the rhythm. And sometimes he's lost and then all of a sudden he brings me back. And then I go to my studio the next day and I try to do that for myself. I want to be lost and then find myself and then get lost and then find myself. And the works that I'm making, I think are trying to do that, whether it's image-wise, physical, material-wise. You know, I got a box of things in my studio that are just kind of like, what the fuck is that? And sooner or later, maybe I can do something with it, you know? And that even goes to I'll just say, I'm sorry, that even goes to my 2 storage units in Queens. I got boxes of material out there I haven't even touched. I have a taxidermy monkey out there that's just chilling. I got a giraffe leg. I have things out there that are just like, what? But sooner or later, I'll figure out what to do with them because I don't know what to do with them yet, you know? And my sense is like, if artists can do that, now, and this is for everybody in the group who feels themselves to be an artist, if you can make work that you don't even know what to do with and create those kinds of questions for yourself in your studio, then you're going to be just fine. You're always going to be able to come back and keep making work. But if you already know what you're doing, where's the fun in that? That's not life. That in a kind of like Nietzschean way is the death principle if it's already predictable. you know. Let me just ask Rob, because I don't know what the time zone is. Rob, how much time do we have left? Are we in questions? Oh, cool.
Can anybody hear me? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of feel like everybody is right there with you. And so the kinds of things that are happening in the chat are just kind of yes and reinforcing. And I don't know that there are any
Oh,
questions in there that are kind of prodding, but
I continue. Just tell me what time you want us to stop, because I can go for hours.
well, it's up to you. I haven't seen anybody leaving, but one of the questions from Judy is if you can speak. I think this was Judy. Can you speak to your relationship? No, this was not Judy. Um, your relationship to labor, maybe even talking about the ecological or economic systems of your studio practice.
Yeah, let's go there. So if we start from a very basic level, like on a conceptual level, right? I remember talking about the fact that the tapestries themselves are, excuse me, are made out of cotton, and I'm, excuse me, picking threads of cotton, right? So there's like that kind of metaphorical correlation to the labor of black bodies, which if we think about in terms of capitalism, there's this great book written by last name is Baptiste. Name of the book is The Hat That Wasn't Told, or The Hat That Was Never Told, where he and my man Fred Moten put me on to this. I love Fred. Holla out Fred, where he systematically explores how black labor picking cotton spawned and produced the industrial revolution. Without us, the industrial revolution does not exist. Um, Understanding that informs how I deal with the tapestries, the picking, the yada yada. In terms of the studio, my problem with my studio is I'm too generous. So I hire my students, and my students are like, yeah, it's an intern. I'm like, I'm paying you. And they're like, what? I'm like, I'll pay you. I pay you way more than minimum wage, because the work that you about to do is gonna hurt your fingers. And I tell them, I'm like, look, anything I have you do, I'm gonna do too. Because I will be damned if I put you in a situation that I wouldn't be willing to put myself in. So during COVID, it's a little different because my studio assistants will come in and they pick on their time, so no one's in there, right? And then they come in individually Wednesday and Saturdays. And then I come in on Saturday mornings before they come in, and Mondays and Fridays, and I do picking too, right? So like I said, I'm here with it. I'm on the ground doing the work with the folks. You dig? And that's important because I feel like a lot of artists have studio practices in which they're holistically divorced from the touching of the material. And I'm a little bit of a snob. Once I learned that, I'm like, oh, that bummed me out. I don't see it the same way, right? Like when you find out someone an artist has someone ghost write for them, I'm like, oh, if Drake could just write this thing, maybe I would feel a little bit better about it. And that's maybe why I lean toward Most Def or something. So that's how I deal with labor in the studio. That's how I deal.
Do we have an image of a distressed jacquard? Like Dailaitang is a kind of very, yeah, or just this one isn't quite. It's good to just kind of show another image of maybe of like one of your works where there's a kind of distressed materiality to it, because I think we keep showing Dailaitang, which is a more kind of solid version of the weaving. You're literally picking at some of the weave structure with a lot of the works that you've been doing in the studio. And I just want to make sure that people that are watching like understand that what you mean when you're talking about picking.
Right. You're totally right. We didn't have that in the image, and I can always provide that on IG maybe tomorrow. People, I'll let you for it. You're right. But let's go back to the one you were looking at, Rob, because the 3 stoppages, which is the Champ title. This was before dilating, right? And even in Stoppages 3 After Long, I wasn't picking, but I physicalized the work. So this is actually a tapestry that was from an image that was from a Fat Albert, which I grew up with the Fat Albert cartoons, which are extremely racist, even though it was produced by a black man who is now in prison. He should be. This was from a coloring book of a Fat Albert, and the image is of a white child on a horseback while a black child walks the horse, right? Steers the horse from the ground, which is holistically reminiscent of slavery, right? And what I did, this is when I was living in Cincinnati. I was a professor at the University of Cincinnati. I had an amazing studio, huge. And I was able to get loose, right? So this tapestry, I was able to coat it in polyurethane, sand it, pick it, dye it. If we get to the close-up, can we get to that close-up, which is the image afterwards, Rob? Like, even if we look at the close-up, there are like glass slides that are suspended from it. There are glass slides that have been embedded into it, right? The glass slides, I had to hire this guy from the middle of nowhere in Ohio because nobody makes glass slides anymore. And he was willing to make glass slides of nothing but black penises, right? And I'm trying to make the correlation between black male prowess and the horse, right? Because black men and black people were treated as chattel in slavery, and trying to find that correlation was in there. And I guess what I'm trying to say is the kind of physicality and the labor that I put into this one tapestry is evidence in future tapestries that, although not in this presentation, are still real, right? And if we even think about the implements, like if we look at this detail just briefly, because we see there's like a kind of conduit, a kind of electrical conduit dragging on the floor. And if we could go back to the whole image, the electrical conduit goes through the whole tapestry and it suspends on the wall by a nail, right? Even those materials that I drew from my studio, which used to be a shoe factory in Cincinnati, speak to labor itself, right? So I think now in the work, which no one has seen, except for maybe Jayne and a few other people, I'm going back into this 2013 method of representing work, where I'm suspending work with implements that are holistically laborious and speaking to class issues, labor, and so on, right? Ooh, yes. Rob, do we have any more questions? Because I want to go somewhere, but if we have a question, sorry, I don't want to bogart the time.
No, it's all right. Well, I don't know. I don't see any other questions.
Matt,
Hopefully I'm not
may I
missing
say
anything.
one thing?
Yeah.
What time do you want to finish? Because I can keep going. Mac, okay, I'll say 5 more minutes, and then let's say we stop at 8:40. Is that okay? Because then I can go watch Mandalorian's episode 2. Yeah. Listen, don't sleep on Mandalorian. People know I am diehard for Lovecraft Country, but Mandalorian is coming into a second. Let me tell you, it is a Western and it's beautiful, amazingly shot. So let's circle back to something, because I think people in the audience need to hear this because it's a call to duty. I really do believe, while I am very hopeful about what transpired Saturday in terms of like the votes are in, shit is happening, we moving. The reality is, and Jayne and I were actually talking about this before in the back room before we went live. The reality is we're not done, right? Secretary of State Pompeo stepped up today and said, I am going to make a second term for Trump. What we talking about? Barr is trying to step in and do some things. What we talking about? The function of the artist is more dire now than even if you are making things that are geometric abstraction or something you don't think has anything to do with our current conditions, you could not be farther from the truth. Our duty, as Marcuse would say in Art and Counter-Revolution, our duty is to stand up and do something. If I am doing like an Ad Reinhardt geometric abstraction, I have to understand that sooner or later that will be the mode of expression to continue us further. Right now, that geometric abstraction may not be the mode of expression, but in 10 years, I'm gonna tell you right now, Ad Reinhardt gonna come back. And his way of speaking, and he's not the only one, Jack Whitten, all those abstractionists, Sam Gilliam, still with us, thank God. That way of speaking is going to be necessary. And if you are not honing that language now in your studio, what the fuck are you doing? Right? Just because people aren't paying it, and I am a hella proponent because nobody was paying attention to me for years. Thank Jayne, she is paying attention to me. Just because you don't feel like people are paying attention to you doesn't mean you don't have value. Your voice has value. I am here to tell you it does. That goes from someone who is making the grandiose painting like a Kehinde Wiley to someone who is sitting in their home and crocheting or knitting socks. All of that expression has value because it gets packed into what I believe is called the Akashic record. We all have these colossal records, and it is a universal record, which all the things we are doing, whether you realize it or not, are being stacked into. And it is informing how we experience the world. If you do not make those things, we are not going to be able to change the world. And I need you to make those things. We need you to make those things. Jayne is doing her part. I am doing my part. What the fuck are y'all doing? As I say before we sign out, as I say with everything, one day I will die. I hope it won't be for another 40 plus years. I take care of myself. But one day I'll go to the other side because I believe it exists. One day I'm gonna go to the other side. And I hope the ancestors, when I cross over, say you did a great job. And I hope when my time is over, I will have done mine to make the world better. The problem with the American structure is that they tell us as artists, we don't have value. They tell us as dealers, if you don't sell work, you have no value. But if you understand the history of art, by which I mean the Greeks, and by way of the Greeks, the Africans, and the Arabic, and the Chinese, fuck America in this regard. They understood that we had value. And if you understand your history, that you have value, then everything you say will have value and have weight and gravitas. Does that make sense? Do not let the American structure tell you that you don't matter, because you do. And if you don't do the legwork now, unfortunately, when you go to the other side, the ancestors are gonna cuss you out. And I'll be damned if Harriet Tubman is gonna say to me, nigga, you ain't doing enough. Dig? So do your job, do your duty. Let's get it. I hope that helped. I appreciate Jayne joining me for this conversation today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, no worries. I love you to death. I appreciate you. Rob, we good?
We are good. Thank you so much to Noel and to Jayne. I'm not going to say anything else after that, but I see Noel. Hold on, we got to go back. What's going on?
Sorry, can I say one more thing? I'm so sorry. I'm looking for allies. So if you want to work, if you want to do presentations, if you want to do things like this, if you want to propose things to like MoMA and Whitney, be like, look, we want to do this panel. Let's make it popping. Hit me up on IG, because I don't know how long I'm gonna be on this earth. That's real talk. I don't know how long I'm gonna be here, and I'm trying to do as much as I can while I'm here. And I need as many people who want to do it with me. Let's get into some good fucking trouble. Thank you.
I mean, it wasn't enough to leave us with a challenge and an affirmation that artists have to do what they have to do now as a job offer too. So now we have to end. It's perfect. Thank you so much, Noel and Jayne, and everybody who's in the audience. Thank you for all your comments, and we will see you soon. I'm just going to end with a bit more information, which is that this lecture series is made possible by support from the FSU College of Fine Arts. And also, if you have any questions, get in touch with us. You can go to artsresearch.fsu.edu and find out more there. Thank you so much, everybody. See you soon.